Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Indica Tent. Our next speaker is Emily Rigby with Cannabis. Where to from here? Now, Emily's a research scientist and a passionate cannabis advocate. She has played an integral role in developing the Australian medicinal cannabis industry and established one of Australia's first licensed medical cannabis cultivation and research facilities. And they release Australian grown cannabis medicine into local and expert markets. She's a board member of the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association and chair and founder of Australian Cannabis Cultivators. Let's give her a big warm MardiGrass welcome. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. It's funny hearing the introduction and people talking about one of the first cannabis research facilities that I set up, because that was a long time ago. It's quite amazing today to join you here at MardiGrass. I would like to first just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and waters who are gathered here today, but I'd also like to acknowledge all of your ancestors and your rich history that has brought us all here to Nimbin under this wonderful Indica tent with a fantastic poster, what do you call it? Sorry, banner, that's it. Fantastic banner behind me. But you can't see it, is it also says I vote, which is of course very important today. And very important for us to be able to make a change here in the world of cannabis. So I suppose I might just begin by telling you a little bit more about me and how I came to be sitting here in front of you on this amazing hay bale couch. It's actually quite comfortable. I could settle in here for a little while. Yeah.
Sleep on it.
Yeah. There might be someone sleeping on it later, I reckon. It's actually pretty comfy. So I have always had a passion for the natural world and natural medicines. I am a horticultural research scientist. I originally studied environmental science, so really love the natural world and trying to heal ourselves with some of the ancient medicines that we've used for a very, very long time, and cannabis is one of those. And it really doesn't sit right with me that we've been restricted in our use of this magnificent plant that we have evolved with. So for those of you who don't know too much about the history of cannabis, cannabis is believed to have evolved about 28 million years ago on the Tibetan Plateau. And humans and cannabis have had a very long symbiotic relationship. So about 10,000 years ago was our first recorded use of cannabis in history. About 4,000 years ago was the first recorded use of cannabis as a medicine. Now we know that the use predates the recordings that we have because not many people wrote things down, and even if they did, it was very hard for us to be able to access that history where we are today. But I thought I might just I've told you a little bit about me and how I've come into the cannabis industry, but I'd like to know a little bit about you. How many people, this is probably a really easy question, how many people here love cannabis? Yeah, I should ask the other question. Is there anybody who doesn't like cannabis that needs convincing otherwise? Yeah, no, of course. We're all in good company. How many people are consumers of cannabis? Keep your hand up if you access it for medical purposes. Keep your hand up if you've accessed it through the legal system for medical purposes. Keep your hand up if you've been happy with that service. A few people, there's a few wishy-washy. Now it's fantastic that we have such easy access to cannabis nowadays. So it was in 2016 that the Australian government made legislative changes to allow for cannabis to be grown for medical and research purposes, which has allowed many of us to access cannabis legally through a doctor. But we still have issues with patient access. We've got issues with the cost of cannabis. We've also got issues with the variety of products and where those products come from. And of course, we're not allowed to grow our own unless you live in the ACT. Then you're very lucky, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But for me, it really doesn't sit right. We've come a long way in the last 9 years when it comes to patient access and affordability and product diversity. But it's still illegal to consume recreationally, although, I don't know about you, but I really feel we have a pseudo-rec med market where basically it's very easy for anyone to get access to cannabis through a medical prescription, but they're not particularly getting good medical care, and perhaps they would be getting a lot better care if they were able to walk into a dispensary and actually talk to a bud tender where they can see all the different products, talk openly about the diversity of products, and hopefully a lot of those products are Australian grown. Because a lot of the products that people are accessing today in the medicinal cannabis industry are imported. And that really doesn't sit well with me. We're really good growers here in Australia, whether that's our home growers. I'm seeing a lot of people nodding. Growing cannabis is pretty fun. Growing anything is actually fun. And I think one of the wonderful things about cannabis is that a lot of people who get into plants when, for their careers, whether they're, more traditional farming, most of these people, their love of plants came from growing cannabis when they were a lot younger. Now, despite prohibition, despite the war on drugs, so cannabis has been used as a medicine in the Western world in the late 1800s, early 1900s, obviously up until prohibition in the 1930s. Then we had the war on drugs. We know the war on drugs does not work. We know that prohibition is an absolute joke. Alcohol was prohibited before cannabis. So if you don't know the history of Henry J. Anslinger, over in the US, who basically is responsible for cannabis prohibition. I don't have enough time to talk about it today, but I do highly recommend that you go and have a look at that history. But it's shocking, and it's spread all around the world. But now we're seeing a landslide as we're coming out of prohibition. So I'm hoping today, with people going to the polling booths, we've got representatives from the Legalised Cannabis Party here. We've got the Greens wandering around as well who support cannabis legalisation, and I'm sure everybody sitting here is supporting cannabis legalisation as well. So we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. When I was trying to work out what I was going to talk about today and trying to succinctly put it into 5 dot points, I don't know if am I allowed to swear? My first dot point was talking about where we are today is, it's fucked where we are. Like, yes, it's great we can get access, but it's dominated by companies that have a lot of money. So it's not, everyday Australians are not able to enter the medicinal cannabis industry to be cultivators or manufacturers. So you need a lot of money to do that. Even companies who have a lot of money, the regulatory burden, the amount of red tape is ridiculous. It takes years and millions of dollars, and I can tell you this because I've done it a couple of times firsthand. And it's not the way that it should be, because cannabis should be growing in all of our kitchen gardens, herb gardens. It's a beautiful plant, but it has so many different applications, not just as a medicine, not just recreationally. And for anyone who's a bit iffy about whether it should be used recreationally, what is wrong with us feeling good? If it's accepted in Australia to go to the pub after work, to relax after a day of a stressful day, or to help you deal with family situations that are happening, something to help you sleep, something that also just makes you feel good. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm very, very pro legalization of cannabis, but I'm very much interested in the responsible use of it, the ethical production and the sustainable production of cannabis. So we've got a lot of work to do, and I hope today we do see some of that reflected in the results in the election here in Australia. But we can't hold our breath, and we can't leave it up to the politicians, and I think a lot of people here understand that. And there's a lot of people here in Nimbin that have been carrying the torch for a very long time, and I'm actually very, very grateful for all of those educators and advocates that have come before me to allow all of us to be able to access cannabis, or just gather here in Nimbin. 30 years this has been happening. It's incredible, and I'm sure the people who started this 30 years ago didn't think we'd still be fighting for legalization. So we really do need to rally together, and events like this are fantastic to meet people, to be educated, to talk with like-minded individuals and see how you can make a difference. Now, when I was younger, there is no way that I thought that my job would be traveling around, even around the world, talking about cannabis. So anything can happen. Never think that you can't make a difference, and I really encourage you to get involved however you can, and even if that's just continuing the conversation. So if you can join in the conversation, start the conversation, whether it's with your doctor, with your family, with your Uber driver, with the waitress or the bartender, the more we talk about it, the more we normalize cannabis. There's nothing wrong with consuming cannabis in a safe and responsible manner that doesn't cause you harm or other people harm. But where there are situations where people are using cannabis and it causes harm, just like people who consume pharmaceutical medications or too much alcohol. We can work through this as a community through education. So prohibition doesn't work, but open communication, open conversations does, and that's why this is a really fantastic opportunity for us to gather here in Nimbin to actually talk about some of these issues. So I've probably said, I've talked a little bit about some of the good points of what we've achieved in the last 9 years since legalization, but there's a lot of roadblocks. We're still seeing discrimination, we're still seeing stigma around the cannabis plant. This is probably one of the, the capitals of Australia to not be discriminated against, with very little stigma when it comes to cannabis here in Nimbin, but the system is still broken. So for people to want to get into the industry, the regulatory burden is too much. For patients wanting to get access, there's a lot of doctors that are receiving kickbacks, conflicts of interests with vertical integration when it comes from businesses owning clinics and paying the doctors when they're supplying their own products, it all gets very, very shady. And then sometimes you hear patients who don't even own their own scripts, which is not how it works. You get a script, that script is yours, the clinic can't hold on to it. So there's been a lot of dodgy things happening in the cannabis industry. I believe legalization will help open that up, because patients who don't need as much medical care are going to be able to go and access cannabis through a dispensary, and those people who really need cannabis as a medicine and need medical guidance can actually get the medical attention that they need. And there's some fantastic doctors and nurse practitioners out there that are really doing the right thing. Now, there are a lot of people who just want to access cannabis, and the clinics are providing that service at the moment, but that's not the way that it should be. We've got this pseudo-rec med market, and we need to separate the two, and I really hope in a couple of years' time we're gathering here in Nimbin and cannabis is legal for you to grow at home, for you to purchase in a similar way that you purchase alcohol, and to consume responsibly, not necessarily walking down the street. Just like alcohol, you can't consume alcohol anywhere. It's restricted to 18 plus. It's not that hard. We know how to do it. One of the other things that I want to mention is when it comes to sustainable cannabis with a conscience, cannabis that is grown in an environmentally responsible manner, in a socially responsible manner, but also, of course, with a profit. We've got to have economic responsibility as well, or no one's going to be paying off their mortgages or putting food on the table. So I'm definitely not turning a blind eye to the need for business and individuals to be profitable, but we do need to be consuming and selecting our cannabis more with a conscience. How many people here know where their cannabis medicine comes from? Have you actually looked on the bottle? And have you sourced Australian medicines? Can you ask for Australian medicines? Yeah,
I got told it all came from Canada.
So that the statement was she was told it all comes from Canada. A lot originally came from Canada. Still a huge amount does come from Canada, but we've got so many amazing Australian growers that are coming online. It's taking years, because I can tell you it takes 2 or 3 years to jump through all the hoops with the Office of Drug Control, to get your license and then to get your permit to be able to actually begin growing. But there are some fantastic groups that are growing in Australia. A lot of it is imported. A lot of it originally was coming from Canada, but we're seeing more supplied from Australian growers. One of the things I particularly want to see, though, is Australian growers really being promoted, Australian growers and manufacturers, not just the importers and distributors. Because if we're supporting our local Aussie grown, then it's fresher because it's come from literally just down the road. It also means, hopefully, that it's cultivated and brought to you with a smaller environmental footprint. So unfortunately, a lot of cannabis is artificially grown. So indoors, artificial sunlight from either HBS or LEDs. You've then got full climate control, air conditioning, heating, chemical fertilizers. We don't use chemicals in the sense of spraying pesticides, but they're still using chemical fertilizers. What I would like to see is a lot more cannabis grown outdoors, or at least in a greenhouse, utilizing the Australian sun. Obviously, we need to be looking at solar and other ways to offset the electricity use, because it is still an intensive industry, especially when you're growing at scale, and being able to consider the ethics behind the whole cannabis industry. So the culture at the farm where the cannabis is grown, how the workers feel, what kind of vibe is it there? Is it a happy workplace with equality? Are we using minimal chemicals and electricity and reducing our environmental footprint? I really believe that cannabis that is kissed by the sun is better for you, whether you're using it as a medicine or recreationally. So Mother Nature knows what she's doing. The plants are stronger. We've got a question over here.
Don't forget the weather.
Sorry?
It's very wet at the moment. It's very difficult to grow outside.
Oh, yes.
You can understand why people want to grow in a controlled environment when it's raining for 3 weeks. But I represent people to grow their own. And everybody should be a gardener. You shouldn't have a license. You can grow 3 plants legally right now, and the cops will come to your place. They rip them out maybe, if they're cruel, but they don't prosecute anything with a small amount. It's a bit different if you've got 100 plants in your backyard, baby. But grow your own, and you can eat it, and you can make cookies and give it to your mates. You can be the most generous person. You can grow your own, and it also grows cars if you do well in your farming. But there is a market, and there's always it starts in your garden. It is best to grow with the sun, but you can also do an indoor-outdoor, and that's what they do in Nimbin. So anyway, go and grow your own, and I'll give them some seeds away tomorrow.
Oh, I like that little plug. Did you hear that? We're giving seeds away tomorrow to grow your own.
Yes, and Cog will be here tomorrow at 11 a.m. He's famous as a local Nimbin grower, so he'll be here for a discussion and share lots of growing tips. Any other questions? Come on, don't be shy. Actually, I have a question. How much medicinal cannabis is provided from Australia now?
That's a really good question. It's quite hard to quantify because the Australian government doesn't share that kind of data. I would say I think we are seeing an increase in the amount of Australian production, but we're still flooded by imports. In 2023, we saw a 70% increase in Australia in imports, while only a 7% increase in local production. But the following year, last year, we saw a significant increase in local production, but a lot of that actually gets exported to Germany, which doesn't help. But there's some fantastic local growers. I know that there's local growers to here that you can access through the medicinal cannabis prescriptions, which is Simra. They're growing organically. I think Simon Pettinger, their grower, just gave a talk about organic cannabis growing just on the other side of the festival. So there's a lot of people doing good things. I would really encourage that when you talk to your doctor that you ask for Australian grown, and that you ask for sun grown, or at least for part of the cannabis cultivation to have been done under the sun, because really important. I mean, anyone who's growing outside this year, it's terrible. It's horrible, this weather.
They call it bush.
But also, can I say something? I do have a hemp license with the Department of Farm and Industries, and they allow me to grow hemp to 1% is my top limit. I had a farmer with one leg in Newcastle. He grew this huge crop. He wanted to grow 600 plants. He said, well, let's plant 420 T1s, which is basically a smokable CBD strain. And we had 120 something for King G's. And last week they gave me a call and said that my crop tested high at 1.5, and we're going to have a bonfire on the 12th. So anyway, luckily, no, we still got stuff from last year anyway. But it's a funny world we live in, because she said to me, well, we're just going to cut them off, and then we round up the top of them to make sure they don't re-sprout. And I said, no, we don't do round up on an organic farm, do we? But the public farm industries, they go onto your hemp farm and willingly round up your crops so your volunteers don't come out. That's a standard practice. You can check it out. But and then I said, well, she said, oh, they have to stay in the ground. I said, do you know how big, whatever is up the top is below as well. They're big roots. We've got big plants in there. And she said, oh, you just have to get a team, So we're going to organise a bonfire party, and we'll probably need some volunteers.
That's a good plug for some volunteers. So it is
stand downwind.
Yeah, it is, and really just highlights the stupidity of the regulations. So I dance at the moment between the medicinal cannabis industry, so the Federal Office of Drug Control that licenses the medical cannabis industry, and the state hemp licenses, which are different. But it's so ridiculous. It's the same plant. And what are we talking about? 0.05% THC it's gone too far.
0.5. And they didn't check the CBD because I'm not allowed to grow for CBD. I'm supposed to do seeds and fiber.
Yeah. So if you have a state research license, then you can't be looking at medical. You can only be looking at research and production for food and fiber or for seed production, which then when you supply has to be below that 1%, which is incredibly difficult because it's a natural plant. And it's going to grow slightly differently depending on how you treat it, depending on the weather, depending on the soil and the nutrition program. But it definitely is a difficult time to be growing outside. So it is really important to look at protected cropping practices that you might be able to use to be able to, for example, just to keep the rain off as an example, but that can then of course create humidity problems. So it's always a fun game growing. I do want to mention one of the groups that I'm working with, the People's Plant, because we're currently also operating under a hemp research license, but we've also got our ODC license, but we're on that long road of fundraising and building so that we can actually bring cannabis to the people. I'm going to do a little shameless plug here because I've been walking around with one of these t-shirts on, and a few people have asked me where they can get them. If you love these hoodies and t-shirts, we've actually got some discount codes for people at MardiGrass, so you can hit me up or my colleague Ben at the back. So I'm going to hold this up for you. That's the back. We've got t-shirts as well. There's trucker caps. But yeah, we love MardiGrass. MardiGrass really resonates with what we're doing at the People's Plant. And so we're really glad to be here and to be mingling with everybody and coming down across the border. As I said earlier, it's my first ever MardiGrass because I used to be terrified of potentially losing my license to come down and cross the border into New South Wales. As a Queenslander, we're quite afraid of crossing the border because you guys, it's not as friendly down here. But even as a cannabis patient, you're discriminated against and are afraid that you might lose your license. So it's quite ridiculous. I know we've got another question, yeah?
I was just going to say that one of the main things that indoor offers is security. So with the adverse weather in this region, it's probably safer and easier. You can still grow organic indoors. I used to have a cannabis association, organic cannabis association in Spain, and we had organic indoors, living soil, just using leads, and you get great results. And really, it's better security too. If you've got it in your backyard, you don't know if you're going to get it at the end of the season always. And with the weather up here, buds don't like water on them, so yeah, indoor just gives you that control.
Yeah, and really, it's really good to acknowledge. I mean, that's what happens when we try and remove all those unwanted variables. So it doesn't matter whether it's raining, it doesn't matter if there's a cyclone, it doesn't matter what the humidity is. You play God when you grow indoors artificially. So you turn the lights on, you set the temperature, you tell them when it's time to flip into flowering, and you have all that control. I just personally prefer some sunlight and love the living soil organics, and I just think there needs to be diversity of product for what people want. I think we've got a bit of an issue with the medical market of people accessing artificially grown really high THC strains. Like no one coming from the black market was smoking THC strains of that level of THC. So if you have a look at the police data of confiscated cannabis, it's more like 10 or 15% THC. So I do have a lot of people who come and talk to me about just private conversations. First of all, they'd be worried that they could never get a legal prescription, and then I explained to them that everything they said of why they use cannabis means that they can be a legal cannabis patient. And then they swap over onto this medical grade weed, which they think is the best thing in the world because it turns up at your door or at your post office. It's all legal. You can fly with it. It's fantastic. We can walk around with it and not feel like criminals. But a lot of people have gone, hang on a second, something's gone wrong in my life. What has happened? Could it be this ridiculously high THC, this really potent flower? And if you're feeling like maybe that hasn't been the best thing for you, maybe have a look at lower THC. You don't need the really high THC. I liken it to going to the pub and lining up shots at the bar. Now, sometimes we want to line the shots up at the bar and drink half a bottle of tequila. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just want to sip on a few beers or a couple of wines and take it easy. So think about that with your cannabis. It's not all about blowing your brains out with the really high THC. Responsible use. I think that's probably one of the things that I just want to sort of hit home at the end of this discussion is to really educate yourselves, but to promote the responsible use. Everything can be abused. Don't use cannabis just as symptom management to hide from something that is not working in your life. Like, use it as a tool. It's a tool in the toolbox, whether it's there to help you relax, there to help you sleep, there for anxiety, there for other more serious medical conditions. That's fantastic, but don't be abusing it. Just like everything in life, everything with moderation, responsible cannabis use, cannabis with a conscience. Think about where it comes from and think about how you can make a difference here. So I never thought that we would be where we are today. I never thought that I would be able to make a difference. And in the last 9 years, I just can't believe how far we've come, but we've still got a long way to go. So I encourage you all to join in the conversation. Go down a rabbit hole, carry the flag. How can you help us remove the stigma and keep removing the discrimination when it comes to drug driving, when it comes to patient access and consumption? We all can make a difference. In the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can make a difference. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So I'll leave you with my mantra, which is to educate, advocate, and make change. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic. So thank you very much, Emily, for sharing your wisdom and your words of thought. And what you were just saying before, I was thinking, yeah, don't pull 30 bongs before breakfast. Is Nick in the building? Nick, calling Nick, our next speaker? No? Or if he is, he's not admitting to it.
Poetry time.
What coffee? Well, yes, the combi's going to be here at 3:30. So if there's anyone got a last minute question for Emily. Sorry, don't get too excited.
We could talk about cannabis all day.
What's your thoughts on patient education and access?
My thoughts on patient education and access. I think it's incredibly easy for patients to get access, almost too easy. I think a lot of patients are more educated sometimes than their doctors, but I think a lot of the doctors are becoming a lot more educated as well. But you should never allow doctors or other people in society to be in charge of holding the knowledge and the education about anything that you're doing. So if you're consuming cannabis, then you should research a lot about it, because your doctor doesn't know you as well as you know you. But I also think when it comes to education, it's talking about it, having these open discussions, whether it's talking about cannabis or psychedelics. We've got the ethiogenesis here with us at MardiGrass this year as well. The more we talk about it, the more we normalise it, the more we can be safe with our consumption, because other people might say something where we go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's really interesting. So, for example, not chasing the ridiculously high THC products, looking at what are the terpenes. It's a real pharmacy in a flower. It's not about the THC. Like if you were to go, and some people do this, you go to the bottle shop and turn the bottles around to see which one has the highest amount of alcohol? Most of the time you don't. Some people do, and they look for the economy. But really, you're there because you want to enjoy, the different beer. You like it because it's local, or it's organic, or it's got some cool artwork on it. It's not just about that one ingredient. And I definitely, we've got a lot of research that shows that it's the terpenes that really characterize the high. So don't let the THC spoil the show, and make sure that you're sniffing the beautiful aromatics of this pharmacy in a flower, cannabis. How incredible. And really finding something that resonates with you. And then talking about it with your mates, with your family, with your doctor, with whoever will listen, with all these beautiful people.
Yes, there's plenty of people. Has Nick turned up yet? No sign of Nick. Okay.
I got a follow-on question.
Question.
Is there any movement towards that at like the medical level to like strain-specific recommendations? Like I know people get like indicas to sleep. Oh, I'd rather not. Thanks.
Yeah, so the question was around, is the medical profession providing guidance on strain selection, for the different therapeutic benefits? It's really hard for being a Schedule 8 substance and not having the clinical research. It is very hard for people to legally say that this will help with a particular condition because unless the clinical trials are there, just the world we live in today, you're not allowed to say that it helps. But there's a lot of forums online. And when we're talking about terpenes, for those of you who don't know exactly what terpenes are the beautiful aromatics of the cannabis plant. So if you've ever come into contact with various types of cannabis strains, chemovars, cultivars, whatever you want to call them, they all smell different. So some are more citrusy and they're high in limonene. You've got ones with linalool that are a lot more relaxing linalols from lavender. You've got some that are better as analgesics and for pain relief, depending on the different terpenes. And we know this because we've been studying, it's aromatherapy. We know terpenes and aromatics, but the cannabis plant's so complex because she's got 700 different unique chemical compounds. So there's over 100 different cannabinoids. Where are we at? I think we're at 145 and counting of cannabinoids. THC and CBD are just 2 of them. So we really have not seen or researched or dived into the full potential of cannabis. And then we've got about 100 different terpenes, and they're not unique to cannabis. So they're found in other things like limonene from lemons, pinene from the pine forests. But what I would say would be to look at some of the online forums that look at the terpene profiles. The problem is that a lot of our products today in the medical market don't list the terpenes, or it's not necessarily accurate. The terpenes that are in there, because it's a very small amount and they're volatile, so they're lost. When you're smelling them, you're losing them. So it is a little bit difficult, but I would say at the moment some of the better doctors, yes, would perhaps be leaning towards the different terpene profiles. I steer away from the indica and sativa because scientifically it means nothing, and it is really difficult, and some people respond completely differently. So some people will consume indica that's meant to knock them out and put them to sleep, and it actually leaves them wired. So you need to work out what works for your body, and that includes the different terpene profiles as well, but I would really look into the different terpenes. Don't just stop at indica and sativa. It's just too basic to try and separate cannabis into like 2 different categories. And then of course you've got so many hybrids. So many different genetics out there, and a lot of them, they're not even tested, so it's actually really hard to say that particular strain is that unless you've got the lab results of what the terpenes are, which most people aren't providing. And of course, if you're growing illegally, you don't have that lab service available to you either. But yeah, trial and error.
Interesting. I see in some of the in some of the Medicam that you get now, there's like little terpene like sachets in there that keep it smelling nicer. But I mean, what are they? Are they real? Or?
Do you mean like the little humidity sachet?
Well, it's not like a little silica thing that soaks up humidity. It's, you can smell that it's got the terpenes in it. And they put it in there to keep it a bit
Smelly.
To cover up that it's crap cannabis. Is that what you mean? So it's really important to note that it doesn't matter how good you grow cannabis. So you can pick the best genetics, grow it fantastically, whether you do it indoors, outdoors, or a hybrid model. If you don't harvest it at the right time, if you don't dry it correctly, if you don't cure it, like all that hard work, that beautiful plant, those beautiful terpenes, it all gets lost in the post-harvest. So for anyone who loves growing cannabis, make sure that you also educate yourself on post-harvest, because it can all fall over if you dry it too quickly, if you dry it too slowly, if it's not hygienic. Curing is a really important step to preserve the cannabinoid and terpene profiles. But make sure it smells, and it's not just about opening the jar and it smells the first time, because if it smells just the first time, you lost them all. And that's why they're probably putting those dodgy sachets in there to make you think that it's still good. But you can actually add terpenes to products
And
as
I wonder
well.
if they're real terpenes or whether they're just chemically assimilated. You know.
Yeah, it depends where they come from. Maybe have a look closer at the sachet next time, yeah. You've really got to be careful when it comes to cannabis because things that might be okay, might be considered safe, like when it comes to pesticides and fungicides or even adding terpenes on top of the flowers or any type of... I hear horrible stories of what people do to cannabis to try and get the mold out of it after they've harvested it. Just remember that all of those products that you're putting on that plant, you are then smoking. So any of those chemicals that are considered safe for food consumption, you're ingesting those. If you're now smoking the cannabis, whether it's through a vaporizer or other methods, you're inhaling those chemicals after a chemical reaction. So what might be safe to eat on table grapes from the supermarket, when you combust it and inhale it, could kill you. So be very, very careful about adding anything onto your cannabis. And cannabis is also a bioremediator, which means it draws heavy metals and pesticides and things like that out of the soil. So if you are growing your own, make sure you're growing it in really clean soil with clean fertilizers, because you don't want to be causing yourself any harm by accident. So make sure you think about those things. Oh, and now we're all stuck in this tent for the rest of the afternoon.
Yes, this is the best way to get an audience. Bring on the rain, and everybody comes flocking in. Has Nick arrived yet? No, so just in case he's slipped in and is waiting his moment. That would have been an interesting talk, because you can talk about psychedelics and why they should stay illegal. And just looking at the little blurb about his talk, I'm guessing his concerns would be about corporatisation. And I think that's what's happening with the marijuana industry. In fact, I remember back even in the 1970s reading that all the tobacco companies had already registered names like Mary Jane and Acapulco Gold and all those names. Yes, this is corporatisation.
Can we talk a little bit about psychedelic medicines and while we wait for Nick?
Well, there's nothing else on now until 3:30, the combi, and we've got a captive audience because how many brought an umbrella? So yes, why not? Bring it on. I've got a mic. Put up your hand if you'd like to ask a question or say something. Take it away, Emily.
We've got some questions at the back. Psychedelic medicines are another passion of mine, and I completely agree with the statement there about the issues with medicalisation. We've already seen it with cannabis. It's about to happen with psychedelics. Question?
It's not the most intelligent. It's a bit more personal preference. Do you have a favourite strain and or terpene?
Impossible to say. I love diversity, and it's got to suit the moment. I think what's really important is that you find things that resonate with you and that suit whatever the therapeutic benefit that you're trying to achieve. It depends what I'm in the mood for. It depends if I want to clean the house, or if I want to go to sleep, or if I'm in pain. It really depends. And I think, sorry.
Pain.
Oh, I can't. This is a hard thing because working in the cannabis industry, we're actually not allowed to talk about these kind of things. And so I love just being like sort of on the edge here. What I would really recommend is looking up the online forums, particularly Leafly. If you've never seen Leafly, they've got really comprehensive guides to different terpenes and things like that. I think the issue is that most of the time we don't know what the strain is, and therefore we don't know what the terpenes are, so we don't even know what it is that we like. But I would say it really depends what it is that people are trying to achieve, and what time of day it is, and what your activity is that you're doing. I'm not really answering your question. I'm being a politician and dancing around it to not get in trouble. But I would say find the ones that smell really good to you, because there is a connection. Your endocannabinoid system is as unique as your fingerprint. So even something that works for me for pain isn't necessarily going to work the same way for you for pain. I have a great story of traveling in the US. I was in a state where cannabis was legal many, many years ago, and I won't incriminate anyone. The person I was with bought what was called a 10-pound hammer. The 10-pound hammer, and it was a joint, so it's meant to knock you out, right? So that you can sleep. A strong, heavy hitter. It's a 10-pound hammer. We were both absolutely wired and could not sleep. Because we're different. Because our endocannabinoid system is different. So it's really a personal medicine. That's why we look at a lot of N=1 trials. So you really need to, unfortunately, do the research, but then a little bit of trial and error. See if there's different products you can get where you can get sample cases. I don't know if we're quite there yet in Australia, but in Canada, when I first went over there, you used to be able to get just little 1 to 3 gram tester packs, so that you could try before you committed to buying the larger amounts. But it's also good to swap it up. So don't just stick on one strain or one kiva bar. It's really important to have that diversity.
Any more questions? Makeup and stuff? Yeah.
Makeups and
What you were
stuff.
saying before about, everybody's different. I think that's a really important sort of topic. And many years ago, I actually had the experience of making a video on the dangers of marijuana. And this is actually the video that if you got busted in Queensland and you went to the diversion program, you get to see the video.
Are you on the video?
What's that?
Are you on the video?
No, I was the writer, the director, the editor. So,
Did you slip some subliminal messages in there?
well, the point I took was it's a drug, and like all drugs, it doesn't suit everybody. And I interviewed a whole bunch of people. All my friends, we didn't show their faces. One of them we just used the voices. One I had to change because she's a school teacher, and she was worried that her students would hear her voice. So she was a bit annoyed. She said, "You made me sound like a drag queen." But the really funny thing was I interviewed her husband as well, and about a year later, his son comes in one day and says, "Dad, I just saw you heard you on a video." So he recognised. Yeah, anyway, we just said basically, yeah, and there are some dangers. Lungs, for instance, it's smoke. How bad is smoke in the lungs? And as someone who's actually suffered from a few lung problems, yeah, that was to my mind, and said the people I made it for seemed quite happy with it. And also, don't have it too young. And an earlier speaker, Trek, was talking about neurophysiology. So while you're young and growing, you're still laying down your neural pathways. And marijuana can kind of interfere with that. And the doctors that we spoke to basically said when people smoked it very young, he said they present as naive. Here's a question.
What does neurophysio, what does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, that's how the brain works. In the brain, you've got neurons, and there's all these pathways. And I think Voitret said there's 80 billion little connections. So they're all kind of firing off. So when, say, your eye sees something, the light travels into the retina, and then behind the retina are the neurons, and they interpret what you're seeing. So all our thoughts come from the brain, and he was saying that after about 37, the neural, well, he talked about neuroplasticity, which means you can change the brain. And what he was talking about was using psychedelics to basically sort of get you out of, say, a depression or anxiety and things like that. Because when you took the psychedelics, it will help you rewire your brain. and change your mode of thinking. But it needed to be done in the therapeutic situation with a counsellor who knows you and he can sort of help direct you. Yeah, I mean, someone who, say, got paranoia and stuff like that, you know, an unreal fear of something, perhaps that could help. So you kind of rewire the brain and change those neural pathways. So instead of, like me, I got attacked by a dog several years ago. So when I see an off-lead dog, boom, I go back into that sort of thing. Does that all make sense? Yeah.
I did.
Anyway, I'm not the speaker, I'm just the MC.
Oh, well, we're just filling in for Nick. So those of you who came and thought we were talking about psychedelics, Nick didn't show up, so we've just been extending our question time talking about cannabis and psychedelics.
And thought we'd just do his talk instead as well.
But oh, look at this, we're getting presents. Excellent. I actually, I have really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you so much for the amazing questions and for standing up for the cannabis plant and helping us remove the stigma and remove discrimination. There's so much work to be done, but it's fantastic that you're all joining in the conversation. We know that prohibition and the war on drugs doesn't work. Despite prohibition and criminalisation, cannabis has remained the most widely used illicit substance in the world. So we need to correct that. We're on the path to do it. There's a long way to go. I'm actually about to head over to speak on a panel about drug driving and homegrown. I think it's behind the Nimbin Hall in the, what's that one called?
That tent behind the Nimbin Hall.
That one over there. So I'm going to walk over there. If you want to talk further about drug driving and homegrown cannabis, I'd love for you to join us. Thank you.
Well, let's give a big MardiGrass thank you to Emily for sharing her experience. And don't forget at 3:30 is the Combi Convoy, which should be passing on the street. That's if, sometimes it is a little bit delayed. They often breathalyse them all, swab them all, and make sure there's nothing bad going on. So thank you all for your attention and happy MardiGrass. I think this tent is closed. There's comedy on here a little bit later, 5 o'clock. So party safe, stay safe on the roads and be kind to one another. Thank you.